The scream of twisting metal echoed across the highway like thunder. A black luxury car spun wildly through the divider under the blazing afternoon sun, smashing into the guardrail before flipping onto its side in a cloud of dust and shattered glass. Drivers slowed for a second, stared in horror, and then kept moving. Some were afraid. Some simply didn't want trouble. But one man slammed the brakes on his old pickup truck without thinking twice. His name was Rowan Hale, a struggling single father who barely had enough money to buy groceries for the week. And within the next few minutes, he would make a choice that would change someone else's life forever, while disappearing from the world without asking for anything in return. Before we continue, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echoes the Stories, if you still believe kindness and second chances can change lives. Stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of courage can create miracles. The highway burned under the bright daytime heat as Rowan jumped out of his dusty truck and ran toward the wreckage. Smoke hissed from the crushed engine. The expensive car looked destroyed beyond repair, one wheel still spinning slowly in the air. Rowan could hear faint coughing from inside. People stood far away recording with their phones. But nobody moved closer. Rowan's heartbeat pounded violently as he crawled through broken glass toward the driver's side. Blood dripped from cuts on his arms while smoke stung his eyes. Inside the car was a man in his late 50s wearing a torn gray suit, unconscious and trapped beneath the collapsed steering wheel. Blood streamed down the side of his face. Then Rowan smelled gasoline. The car could explode any second. Fear gripped him, but another thought hit harder. His daughter. 7-year-old Ivy was waiting at home for him. She had already lost her mother 3 years earlier to illness. If something happened to him too, she would have no one. For one terrible moment, Rowan froze. Then the injured man suddenly whispered weakly through cracked lips. "Please, don't let me die." Those words shattered every hesitation inside Rowan's heart. With a desperate roar, he pulled at the twisted door until his muscles burned. Metal groaned loudly. Sweat poured down his face under the harsh daylight. Finally, the door bent open just enough for him to squeeze inside. He ignored the pain slicing through his hands as he fought to free the trapped stranger. The man drifted in and out of consciousness while Rowan struggled against the crushed dashboard. Every second felt endless. Smoke thickened around them. Then finally, with one violent pull, Rowan dragged the man free just moments before flames burst from the engine. The explosion shook the road. People screamed and ran backward while Rowan collapsed onto the pavement, shielding the unconscious stranger with his own body. Sirens filled the distance. Paramedics rushed forward, surrounding the injured man. Someone shouted that the victim was Elias Mercer, one of the richest billionaires in the country and owner of Mercer Global Holdings. The name spread through the crowd instantly like wildfire. Everyone suddenly cared now. Reporters would later call it miraculous survival. News channels would replay the burning car for days. But when paramedics turned to thank the man who had saved Elias Mercer's life, Rowan was already gone. He slipped quietly back into his battered truck and drove away before anyone even asked his name. Because Rowan Hale didn't save a billionaire for money. He saved him because he couldn't live with himself otherwise. By the time Rowan reached his small rental home on the edge of town, the sun hung low but still bright across the afternoon sky. Ivy ran outside barefoot the moment she heard his truck. Her smile always made the world feel lighter. But that day she noticed the blood on his shirt immediately. Panic filled her tiny face as Rowan knelt beside her and promised he was okay. He smiled gently despite the pain in his ribs. He told her he had only helped someone after an accident. Nothing more. That night, while Ivy slept beside a worn stuffed rabbit, Rowan sat alone at the kitchen table staring at unpaid bills stacked beside cold coffee. The landlord had already threatened eviction. His construction hours had been cut again. His truck was barely functioning. Some nights he skipped dinner so Ivy could eat enough. And still, despite everything crushing him, Rowan never complained. He simply kept going. The next morning, every television station exploded with news about Elias Mercer surviving the deadly crash. Experts said the billionaire should have died instantly if not for the unknown stranger who rescued him from the burning vehicle. But nobody knew who the rescuer was. Security footage from the highway was damaged. Witness descriptions were vague. Some called him a hero. Others thought he was a passerby who vanished before cameras arrived. Elias Mercer, still recovering in a private hospital room flooded with daylight, became obsessed with finding the man who saved him. Because during those terrifying moments inside the wreckage, he had looked into Rowan's eyes and seen something unforgettable. Not greed. Not fear. Only compassion. For years Elias Mercer had lived surrounded by powerful people who wanted something from him. Business partners. Politicians. Opportunists. But the man who pulled him from death disappeared without even giving his name. That haunted him deeply. Weeks passed. Rowan returned to work carrying hidden bruises across his body. Life remained painfully difficult. Ivy's school informed him her tuition was overdue again. One afternoon he sat alone in his truck staring at a rejection letter after applying for another construction contract. Everything felt like it was collapsing. But Rowan kept smiling for Ivy. One sunny afternoon, while fixing fences outside a warehouse, Rowan suddenly noticed several black SUVs pulling into the parking lot. Men in suits stepped out, scanning the workers carefully. Then one approached Rowan directly. "Mr. Hale," the man said calmly. "Someone wishes to meet you." Rowan's stomach tightened instantly. Hours later, Rowan found himself standing inside one of the most luxurious office buildings he had ever seen. Massive windows flooded the room with daylight overlooking the city skyline. And sitting quietly near the window was Elias Mercer himself. Alive. Healthy. Watching Rowan with emotional eyes. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. Then Elias stood slowly and walked toward him. "You disappeared," he said softly. Rowan lowered his gaze awkwardly. "I didn't think anyone needed my name." Elias stared at him in disbelief. Most people would have chased fame. Interviews. Reward money. Attention. But Rowan had vanished back into poverty without expecting anything. That truth shook Elias more than the accident itself. As they spoke, Elias learned about Ivy. About Rowan losing his wife. About the endless financial pressure slowly drowning him. Rowan never asked for help during the conversation. Not once. And somehow that made Elias trust him completely. Over the following weeks, something unexpected began to grow between them. Not charity. Friendship. Elias invited Rowan and Ivy to visit his estate one bright weekend afternoon. Ivy laughed while running through gardens bigger than entire parks. Rowan watched nervously, feeling out of place among wealth he could barely comprehend. But Elias never treated him like a charity case. Instead, he treated him like family. For the first time in years, Rowan felt seen. What Rowan didn't realize was that Elias had quietly started investigating his life behind the scenes. He discovered unpaid medical debts from Rowan's late wife. He discovered Rowan had secretly donated blood multiple times for extra money. He discovered teachers describing Ivy as brilliant but often hungry. Each discovery broke Elias's heart further. Because the man who saved a billionaire's life had been barely surviving himself. Then came the morning everything changed forever. Rowan arrived home after work to find strangers carrying furniture onto the sidewalk. The landlord had finally evicted them. Ivy sat quietly on the curb holding her stuffed rabbit while tears rolled silently down her cheeks under the hot afternoon sun. Rowan felt like he had failed completely. He stood there speechless, broken, exhausted beyond words. Then a familiar black SUV pulled up slowly beside the curb. Elias Mercer stepped out. He looked around at the scene silently before turning toward Rowan. "You saved my life," Elias said quietly. "Now let me help save yours." Rowan tried refusing at first. Pride burned inside him. But Elias handed him a folder. Inside were documents transferring ownership of a small fully paid home into Rowan's name.